let me introduce you to our speakers. With us today, we have our resident NG9-1-1 experts, Jim Carlson, our Senior Account Director and Guru of Public Safety, and Doug Cunningham, our Lead Sales Engineer and knower of all things technical. Unfortunately, Mike Zody will not be able to join us today, but Jim and Doug are two of the most knowledgeable men on our public safety team, and I'm sure they'll have no difficulty speaking for three. So I'll set the stage, and then we'll go ahead and dive right in. As state and local agencies move 911 and emergency communications to the cloud, while adding services and capabilities to legacy systems, they face the critical question: how do you identify the best route to next generation 911 and determine the right solution for your agency? Today, we will discuss how to make the transition to digital ready next generation 911 and share some of the best practices we've learned from helping agencies modernize their emergency services. Think about things like innovations in core services and solutions, operational benefits of policy-based routing, the power of opening conversations to discuss options, cybersecurity, and the importance of proper implementation. Now, of course, we've created some questions to kick things off, but please don't forget to submit your questions. It is your opportunity to dig into what CenturyLink's doing and how we're doing it. So put those questions in the box. And with that, we'll dive right in. So the first question: what are some of the challenges you're seeing for PSAPs and emergency services agencies as a result of COVID-19? And how have these underscored the need to accelerate transition to next generation 911? Let's start with Jim on this one.
Sure, thanks, and hello everybody, and thank you for joining us. You know, the COVID-19 pandemic has been one of those experiences that we all share really around the world. And I think we would probably agree that one of the things that is notable about it is how quickly it came upon us. Here in Kansas City, where I live, on Friday, my wife and I took our grandson to dinner, and on Saturday morning, the city shut down schools and churches and businesses, and things changed for us overnight. And so what we've seen across the country, and you all in PSAP leadership, I know, have lived this, the response that leaders in the centers have had to do to keep their employees safe. So securing PPE, distancing practices, creating spaces where individuals who are high risk could go, and keeping certain individuals from coming into the centers to keep things safe, and needing to do that right away, and in using innovative techniques. And so what we see Next Gen 911 offer to the community, to the public safety community, is that kind of flexibility. So think about a scenario where on Monday, the entire center's employee base is looking good and they're healthy, and by the end of the week, maybe 15 people have been diagnosed with COVID-19. That could happen if you're in a hotspot. But with some of the capabilities of next-gen core services and policy-based routing, you could set up policies in advance based on criteria that you design, where certain traffic could go to a different center during a period of time. And so as your employees are needing to go home for a couple of weeks to get better, hopefully to get better, you have that flexibility within the platform to direct traffic to a different location. Or if part of your Next Gen 911 implementation includes hosting PSAP applications in the cloud or in a data center, that's in that environment where the, let's say, call handler works doesn't really matter technically. And so workers could work from home. Now you have security issues to deal with and network reliability issues to deal with, but that flexibility is there. So I think what COVID-19 reminds us all is the importance of all the flexibility that Next Gen 911 will offer.
I agree with that, Jim. You know, another element on that also is that policy-based routing, right? That can help us enable even additional centers, right? So I know we'll get into that a little later, but I just wanted to add a little bit on that comment. It's a good point.
Great. All right, so we'll move on to the next question then. What are some of the key things agencies need to think about as they plan for the transition to next generation 911? What should agencies be evaluating or looking at within their existing 911 systems and IT systems? Let's start with Doug on this one.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. But first off here, I would really say technology, right? That your provider is currently staying involved with standards, development for those standards as well. Several providers in the industry today, you know, they were leaders. They've been doing this for many years, but their technology is a little stagnant, right? They're not moving as fast as some of the other providers. I would say, you know, focus on that. Also, understand that they're delivering a true I3 call, right? We want to move forward with our solutions. Let's make sure we're delivering PITA-Flow to the PSAP. Let's make sure that we're providing notification and subscription-based elements as well for function state, element state. So also design experience, right? Often overlooked the network, which your NG9-1-1 delivery for your EZNet. Make sure that your network providers are building you a public safety purpose-built network, not just a wholesale design.
Yeah, those are great points, Doug. And, you know, to me, all this kind of comes in an overall category of how do you set the stage for your journey going forward? How do you do your homework to make sure you understand across the jurisdiction, whether it's a county or a state, you understand all the technology that's in place? And as you make decisions moving forward, are you really plugging into the future? And so following I3 standards becomes so essential because that's where the future is going, and ensuring that all those that you partner with are of a similar mindset. And so, yeah, so Doug, I agree with what you shared.
Great. And again, please feel free to drop any and all of your questions in for our awesome panelists into the Ask a Question box. So we're going to go to Doug again with this one. Can you talk about the latest innovations in core services and solutions that today's agencies should be aware of when making the transition to next generation 911?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest ones that come to mind for me right now is what's happening for location accuracy and then media handling, right? Those are two big ones. You know, there's obviously others for IoT, things like that. But I think for the main two that I would point out are probably those, right? Obviously, precise location of a caller is going to drive the call to the correct PSAP for Next Gen 911. It's going to allow for seconds to be shaved off of the responses to save more lives. I mean, that's the bottom line of what our mission statement should be for public safety and delivering next-gen core services and next-gen 911. Obviously, you know, we're all working towards that goal to save lives. For media delivery, obviously there's the addition of different media types that come with that, from video and text that go along with that 911 emergency call. How are you going to handle those? How are your SOPs going to be delivered? Obviously, those all have to be worked out, but those are big innovations to what we see today in 911 from a traditional call. I think we can also add enhancements for other industry to this, right? Like if we look at technology, what's happening in enterprise and government spaces, leveraging technologies like SD-WAN for the network. Those obviously enhanced capabilities provide more scalable and I guess seamless integrations for convergence depending on your SD-WAN vendor. And then adoption of cloud technologies that enable us to provide, you know, you can sit anywhere, as Jim mentioned before. These are all things I think that are innovations that are changing Next Gen 911 as an industry and as a whole.
Yeah, you know, as I think about the future and I think about where all this grows over time, as Doug mentioned, the topic of all that data and how we can learn from the data and how we can make first responders more aware of the situations that they're racing into. How can we save more lives and protect the first responders and save property really is exciting. And, you know, we don't have to invent the data. The data is already out there. It really becomes a journey of how do you connect the data and move it to where it needs to go, and then how do you learn from it? And so it's really exciting to me to see this evolution happen. And I think it's really going to be important that it happens in a way where the data is secure and reliable, and it's interconnected. So you don't have a bunch of sideway paths to get to the data that maybe you're not integrated overall EZNet or into the overall next-gen 911 platform. And so that integration, that use of the information, that sharing of the information so everybody can learn from it is really going to be important.
Awesome. We've got a bunch of questions flowing in, so I'm gonna throw some questions out at you. In your opinion, which is better for positioning for the future of 911 communications? A premise-based next-generation 911 solution or a hosted SaaS next-generation 911 solution?
Well, Doug, you want to take that one?
Sure. I mean, positioning-wise, I mean, really, it's where the future is going, right? If we need a scalable solution that meets a funding model that can keep up with the times to make sure that your technology churn is always insured, right? I hear that as a major concern for most of the PSAP authorities we deal with today. Is I buy a system today, in 2 years I have to do an upgrade for another couple $100,000 or whatever the money, right? That's a big issue that we see in the industry of how do we keep things always evolving, always up to date. The needs of a PSAP have changed from what they were 5 to 10 years ago. You know, it went from this environment that was a break-fix environment to now proactive monitoring, proactive solutions. All of that comes natively in a hosted cloud-based solution. These are things that when you're working with a provider like CenturyLink, hopefully, that are wrapped into a full managed service deployment for you.
Yeah, those are good points. My observation kind of at a high level on a question like this, or really any decision about the future, is there is no one size fits all. And so that means that the conversations that you have with the partners that you're going to work with become really important. And what Doug's done a nice job doing is describe the characteristics and the benefits of a hosted model, of a cloud-based model. And those are real. And those are significant, and there's a reason why so many solutions, so many applications are being delivered as a service model across the full range of applications that are in the marketplace. But we also recognize that there are use cases for premise-based solutions, and so it's important to have the conversations that explore the merits of the options that you want to take. And then you can make really good decisions about the future, the journey that you want to be in based on that information. So I think it's important as you bring together the people who you want to be in those conversations with, the people that you want to collaborate with, that they're able to give you a range of options and then go through the conversation that helps discern what's the best for your situation and what you're trying to accomplish for the communities that you're looking to take care of.
Great. Okay, we have another question. How does CenturyLink address mobile and remote workers? Are you able to dynamically know where users are located at any given time?
Well, I'll let Doug answer the technical part of it. I'll certainly say that within the COVID-19 pandemic, our company, CenturyLink, has gone to great lengths to enable as many employees as possible to work mobile, to work from home. It's just been the way our company has taken care of our employees, and I know personally I greatly appreciate that. But in terms of awareness of where folks are. Doug, I don't know if you have any insight to that.
Sure. It's actually pushed forward a lot of things that have been developed and out there for quite some time, right? Obviously, the larger enterprises have been doing this for some time, where they employ list servers to provide that location information for where remote users are. And if we're talking in relative to that terms in the question, I really think that's how we move forward, is the advent or standing up of additional list servers has become a need that we've seen all over the country to provide that location information for voice-based users or any VPN-based users that are remote working now. And that obviously has database implications for it as well, that now you have to have a provider that can integrate and work with these location information servers to consume them. Next Gen 911 gets us there.
Oh, I was on mute. I will repeat the question then. What does CenturyLink believe is the most important thing for a state to focus on that wants to move from E911 to NG9-1-1?
So I'll start there. In CenturyLink's business, we've been in the what I think a term that we're all familiar with, most likely the data transformation business, the digital transformation business for a long time, and we recognize that this transition from E911 to next Gen 911 is complicated. It's complicated, along a lot of different fronts. The technology evolution in and of itself has complexities to it, for sure. And those have to be taken care of in the transition process. But there's also changes in how folks are communicating. There are the changes that affect our employees in the centers, affect the citizens. And so there is a lot going on. And there's the evolution of the environment is changing as well. So as you think about standards that are evolving and new technology that's coming in. So as we think about how to advise the folks we talk to about how to make that transition, we really focus on the quality of the conversations that they're going to be having with their ecosystems of partners, and really advising that gather around you a strong ecosystem of partners, and it can be service providers, it can be consultants, it can be folks in the community, it can be a whole range of people in the ecosystem who need to come together and think through, what does this transition look like? What are the options that we want to consider, and then how do we make decisions about what option to go with? And are we making decisions now, the foundations that we put in place now? Are we making decisions now that will equip us for the future when we don't know necessarily what the future is going to look like? Those are all important elements for transition.
I agree, Jim. I think that's the approach. As you mentioned before, there's not one size that fits all, but there are conversations to be had on the technology, on understanding the network design expertise of who you're working with, right? Focusing on your pain points that you have as a customer. Those are things that we look to partner with to help assist get you through. Even though the technology has become quite complex, there's providers that have been pretty successful out there of doing these. There's track record, there's history of complex deployments, and I would look to that as well, right? Having that experience of implementation, knowing where, I hate to say, where the bodies are buried, those things help as well in our conversations and deriving that out of your conversations. having the experience in that footprint helps facilitate those moving forward.
Yeah, and I think to Doug's point, I think that's that really is an important consideration. So there's sometimes properly, drawn out process that states and jurisdictions go through to get to the point of deciding what they want to do. And then a choice is made. And then there's the process to go through to implement that choice. And that really becomes a place where the complexity comes alive, because there's so many things in that implementation that need to be taken care of. And so my advice to folks who are getting ready to move in that direction is to pay attention to that complexity. Now, I know you're going to work with partners who will help you manage the complexity, like CenturyLink can do. We have a strong program management organization that helps manage implementation projects. But it's important, I think, to be aware of that complexity and where that complexity sits. So if you think about the implementation of an EZNet and next-gen core services, all the tasks that need to be done kind of group into two different areas. One are those tasks related to standing up the applications, the next-gen core services for the ultimate users. And so those applications are going to live in private data centers or in the cloud. And there's work that needs to be done to get those applications ready. But then there's the other category of work that has to be done, which is on the network side, on the connectivity side. And that's where it is unique as all the locations that are going to be hooked together. And so that's where the work tends to be more customized at the network side, tends to be a longer time frame. And because it's more complicated and more involved, the opportunity for schedule risk can show up. And so what I like to help folks understand as they're moving in this direction is, hey, as you're working with your provider, pay attention to the art and science of how the implementation happens. And the science is really all the common tools and practices that program managers have. The art of it, though, is how are the people working together? And how does that happen? And that really is important that we pay attention to that. We've recently completed a journey with the state of South Dakota where we've implemented a EZNet across the state with next-gen core services and a hosted call handling application all at the same time. And what a wonderful partnership that was, and a journey for us. And I had a great opportunity to have a conversation with Monica Smith, one of our program managers, and she described kind of the journey to me, but also the relationships formed with her counterparts in the state and how she really counted them as friends. Now, I don't share that story with you to say that the goal of an implementation is to make friends, but I do want to make the point that when that is the outcome, when the relationships are strong, that's when implementations tend to go better. So I think it's important to pay attention to the science and to the art of how an implementation happens.
Awesome. We've got a ton of questions rolling in, so I'm going to try and get to all of them. If I don't, I promise we will get somebody to answer them. So this is a great one. So I retired from the state of Arizona 911 office and saw the value to move towards a managed services base. We had over 40 PSAPs on managed when I retired. How do you convince people to go to managed services? I think it is the wave of the future. Doug, Jim, who wants to start us off?
Jim, I'll jump in here. I really think, we definitely have across the country with several vendors success stories that show that model works, right? It's really comes down to two things, in my opinion. One is funding operations, right? How that's funded through the future. Is your state going to be able to recoup funds? Those are places that you have to start. The other is really choice, right? You've got to weigh out, just like anything in life, the pros and cons for each solution, what you're getting trade-off for what you're losing. And the upside to managed services that we've seen in those marketplaces have reduced truck rolls, able to fix things remotely much more often. We've seen a lot more development, keeping technology up to date in the solution across the board, where you're on a common platform, which helps when you're delivering calls to multiple PSAPs. So those are a few things that I see that help in that conversation. But as far as convincing users to move one way or the other, all we can do is share the data, and that's where I would start.
Yeah, well said, Doug.
Great. Okay, with all of the cybersecurity attacks that government agencies are experiencing, what can be done to protect 911 calls and data for a state that has moved to NGCS? Who wants to start that one?
I'm going to let Doug start that one.
So obviously there are security concerns when you move to Next-Gen 911. Understanding your design, understanding your delivery of your underlying IP EZNet is one. Obviously each vendor has their own security strategy. The standard calls out for making sure all your elements are secured by border control functions, firewalls, meaning that you'd have active SBCs, as well as following PCA, TLS, security suite for Next-Gen 911, right? But it doesn't stop there, right? For every mechanism that we deploy or employ to protect against a solution, there's someone out there developing a new one to stop. Next-Gen 911 does help us with moving forward for TDOS, DDoS issues that we see in the enterprise today. We've solved for them. We've employed those into our Next-Gen core services design moving forward. Underlying network for your MPLS structure, how your companies are designing those, keeping them either in a segmented factor away from internet traffic, that all has design implications for a public safety based network.
Yeah, I agree with you, Doug. And to me, this all comes back to design. The design is so essential to the success of the solution, and recognizing that the standard that we all need to be building to in the design is a public safety grade standard, which recognizes that because of how these solutions are used to save lives, they need to be designed really, really well. And you are just not going to have a public safety grade design without a cybersecurity infrastructure that protects the solution. And so you have to have that in place, but you also have to have the proper redundancy and resiliency built into the network. You have to have the proper monitoring of the network all the way through, so you can see what's going on and respond at a moment's notice to any interruptions of service. But cybersecurity is a core. And the last thing I would say is the techniques to take care of cybersecurity for Next-Gen 911 are the same techniques that service providers like CenturyLink implement already, and we've been doing for many, many years across the state, around the world with the federal government. And so those tactics, those tools, those practices are the ones that we would use in a Next-Gen 911 infrastructure.
Great. What is the CenturyLink solution transformation methodology, and how does it provide agencies with a structured, pragmatic approach to designing next-generation 911 solutions?
Yeah.
Jim?
Yeah, I'll take that one.
Throw that one over to you. I know that's one for you.
So, I mentioned earlier this concept of digital transformation, and it's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but it's important to kind of start there. So our company about 10 years ago, we recognized that when digital transformation, when it showed up as a company trying to move all their applications into the cloud, maybe they wanted to close down their data center and have it all in the cloud. That was a complicated thing. And so we designed a methodology that we call the solution transformation methodology that is designed in such a way starts to dig into that complexity and figure out what's the best solution for a particular situation. And so what we've done over the last couple of years in our public safety practice is we've taken that methodology and customized it for public safety. And what that methodology seeks to do is to be structured but flexible, and structured from a perspective of, how the meetings go and the agendas and how they're formed and things like that, but also flexible, recognizing that the environment that most of the folks that we work with are moving through is one where the ultimate destination may not necessarily be obvious, that it has to be explored to get there. And so what our solution transformation methodology does is it gathers the right people together, and that's really important, with the right designs for a conversation, recognizing that where an organization is, a state or a county or a city is in the next generation 911 journey, where they are depends, the kind of conversations that they need to have varies. And so we design these conversations, we bring all the right people together, and that's really important. So on our end at CenturyLink, what we'll do is we'll bring our bench strength of technical folks to the table, whether it's EZNets and next-gen core services, cybersecurity, storage, data analytics, those kinds of disciplines we'll bring to the table to have conversations, but we'll also gather into the conversation partners that we work with. We have a full range of organizations that we work with in partnership, and having them at the table to speak to their area of expertise is important, because the goal in the conversation is to have a really good conversation. And a really good conversation is defined as one that produces an output that best meets the needs of the customer or of the individuals that we're talking with. So we're really excited about these kinds of conversations, because we really feel our experience tells us that they really, really produce a good result for the folks we're working with.
I think that's good, Jim. I mean, really, I mean, the only comment there is it really defines, from where you are to where you want to be, right? And that's what those conversations drive. And I think that the STM, or the solution transformation methodology, helps drive that conversation. I believe you're muted again. Lesley.
Sorry about that. I'll just leave it on from now on. So are you ready for a technical question? I know you're excited. Got another one for you. Woo! As a LEC and originating service provider, what is CenturyLink doing to drive the transition from TDM/SS7 based carrier ingress to native SIP with location at call origination? Mouthful.
Obviously, that's a major issue that we see across the country with all major wireline providers, right? Being a LEC ourselves, we have an issue with declining access line base, declining revenue, versus a transition model into the next generation and change into the future. One thing that CenturyLink is doing is looking at these markets, looking at where we can make that move from a Class 5 switch, voice switch, into a Class 5 VoIP switch. Those transformation methodologies are obviously something that we're undergoing as a service provider for wireline in those footprints, and obviously take time and return on investment conversations that show when and how we transition out of that market. So.
Awesome.
Yeah, well said, Doug.
Okay, so there's a couple of questions on this, so I'm going to kind of combine it into one. So one of the questions is, what is Nina's I3 standard, and why is it such a large topic? And then we had a question that's, how do you explain the I3 to the layman and the importance of I3 and what it provides?
So Nina's I3 architecture is the basis of what the next-gen 911 call delivery network looks like or is based on. The major difference is inherently how you derive a location from a call and what you do with it and when you do with it. Today in the E911 network, location is not really involved much with the call delivery at all. It's delivered based off of a tabular table that says, I get a call from here, send it to this destination. Next gen, we're able to use that location before we make that routing decision. So we can send a call to a smaller PSAP in an area or a larger PSAP based on that location. We can also derive things in the future, like if it's a medical call, if it's a non-voice call, right? We can make those routing decisions way earlier. The Nina I3 architecture helps define those standards of how we deliver. Otherwise, everyone's going to create their own methodology, their own proprietary method, where you may not be able to communicate to your neighboring EZNet or your neighboring provider.
Yeah, that's a really important point, Doug. And I guess my perspective on standards is we always need to remember how complicated this is and how many parts there are to it. And that's only expanding over time. And it's not just in one state or one county. It's how do states hook together? How does all the data come together and move to the right place? How do applications hook to the network and deliver solutions to the PSAP? How does all that happen? And one of the ways it has to happen is in an integrated fashion. It's only going to have its full value. Next-Gen 911 is only going to have its full value when all the parts are integrated together, when all the jurisdictions, all the states can seamlessly share information and work together. That's where the value is, and standards are going to drive that. So I think it's essential, and I know, CenturyLink is fully committed to this. The partners that we work with are fully committed to this, and I know, around the industry, many organizations are working to ensure that those standards are in place, because it's going to be essential to experiencing the full value of what Next-Gen 911 is.
I agree, Jim. Despite popular opinion, PFM is not a defined standard and only exists in E911. So right. Next-Gen 911, there's no existence of that.
Right.
Right. Can you discuss the importance of proper implementation as agencies transition to digital-ready NG9-1-1? Doug, do you want to start us off? Or Jim, do you want to start us off?
Well,
Jimmy, go ahead.
I touched a little bit on that already, and I'm curious. Doug, I know he's personally involved in some implementations that we're working on now, and so he's going to have a point of view that's very much kind of front line. I think the only comment I would make is it's really complicated. The design needs to be done really well, and then the orchestration of the implementation, which is really people working together. I mean, the technology works, in implementations itself once everything gets set up. Real complication comes in is on the people side, because people are people, and how you bring all those elements together into a project plan and how you implement them becomes so important. But Doug, I'm going to let you share your thoughts.
Well, I'm kind of biased to the design side myself, right? That's where my focus really resides. But I will say this, really that's where it does start, right? If you have a proper design, then the implementation becomes much smoother. And I really honestly feel that that's where it starts. If you do it right up front, then the implementation is all that much better. I don't want to use the word easy because I don't think there's anything in this that's easy.
I would agree with you on that, Doug.
Okay, let's try and get through a couple more. How do the new NG9-1-1 solutions interact with the call handling vendor solutions?
Doug,
Jimmy, want me to take that? Yeah. Really, it's helped drive that market. We mentioned the description of the i3 architecture. There's obviously things out there that have been out there for quite some time that the call handling vendors have not really migrated to. Example, EIDD. No one developed towards that at all whatsoever that I'm aware of. That's just one example of manufacturers just ignoring that part of the spec. As we see this move forward and more states migrate, it's driving these manufacturers to adhere to those standards so that they have a place in the marketplace. And it's that exactly. If you are going to be set in your ways and not develop to your standards that people are delivering to you, then obviously choices are going to be made that are probably going to negatively impact your standing. So I would say that's probably the largest impact. Obviously, next-gen core services vendors have some obligation to that as well. We have paths forward. That's why the advent of the legacy PSAP gateway is there. So if there's a transitional method, we obviously have a way to handle those scenarios. But for moving forward with next-gen 911, it's really collaboration by all. And that's why the standards are there.
Good point.
Great. Okay, I'm going to try and fit in 2 more questions. Just a quick reminder that we've got survey questions, and we'd love to get your feedback. So if you have a few minutes to do that before you jump off of the webinar or our CoffeeTalk webinar, that would be great. So we've got one that says, how do you recommend that a state look forward to a statewide development?
Yeah, so I'll take that. You know, what's interesting, of course, you know, we're involved in conversations across the country with, you know, sometimes it's at a state level, sometimes it is at a county level, and it varies. And there is no one size fits all to what a journey of next-gen 911 looks like. But what we observe in those conversations, and then in the more specific implementations that we have been involved in, is that a statewide approach is much more efficient in terms of the experience of your community. And so where we have seen that work well, like in states like Nebraska, where the state was really well organized around gathering the input from all the affected stakeholders around the states. And that's a common approach around the country, where it begins with getting the stakeholders at the table at a state level in the agency that maybe provides oversight to the state, but also at the PSAP level, and the community and, you know, all the stakeholders, and getting everybody onto the same page as it relates to why. What are the benefits of this journey? You know, what are the costs, how things are going to get paid for, and all those things. But then come to a consensus as a community, as an ecosystem within a state, on what the path forward will be. And then implementing a solution where it provides the proper level of flexibility to the individual PSAPs. And we've seen different models implemented where a common approach can be deployed across the state, where a range of options can be deployed in a state, and each PSAP can make their own decision. Those are decisions that are unique to a state. But What it always comes back to is the quality of conversations that are going on in the state and really working hard to ensure that voices are heard and folks are plugged in the whole journey of getting to having to make those decisions on what path to take.
Great. All right, so our last question for today's Coffee Talk, and I think it's a great one to end on. What are the kinds of questions that agencies should be asking prior to choosing a next generation 911 solution suite? Who wants to start off?
I can start it. Yeah. So really questions that come in mind for me are, does the design have a purpose-built public safety network for your EZNet, right? Do you have that experience to build that? Does your vendor conform to NENA I3 delivery? Are you getting PID-flow already to your PSAP? Can my call handling equipment handle that? What do I need to do to get my call handling there? Am I employing my security measures at that PSAP adequately? Why not cloud or hosted? Is that the next solution that's right for you? Those are the questions that are at the forefront of my mind when I think of this conversation. And I'm happy to entertain any of them to any of you.
Yeah, those are great. And those are great questions. And so what I would add to that is it's going to be important to probe with your service provider on how they move through the implementation process, how they're going to take care of setting up a new OSP, originating service provider connection. How will new connections be made into database services that are going to be required? How will new connections be established in various parts of the infrastructure, and how will services be turned up? And then also, how will the solution be managed? How quickly will you hear if there's a problem on your solution and that notification? What are the methods for that? And what are those those agreements look like with your service provider? So really understanding not just the technology itself, which is really important, but also the experience that you're going to have in the years ahead.
Fantastic. So that was our last question. I just want to go to Jim and Doug. Is there anything that you want to close us out with? Any final thoughts that you have?
I'll go first. Well, first, thank you all. Most of you on the call are from the public safety industry, and I know I speak for Doug on this. It really is an honor to be able to be partnered with an industry whose purpose to save lives and protect first responders. And so what an honor that is, and thank you for joining us this morning. I will say that this is complicated, but it has so much potential to it, Next Gen 911 does. But we'll all work through that complication through having really productive conversations about what are the possibilities and where to go and how to get there. So we're just excited to be a part of as many of those conversations as possible. And we would love to talk to you about that and explore what that might look like in your particular neck of the woods.
Thanks, Jim. Those are all good points as well. And for me, really, it comes down to stop doing what's required and start doing what's right. I know working for ELEC, we have this moniker that sometimes is hard to shake, but here at CenturyLink, that's really what we're trying to do. It's what I try to bring to work every day, is integrity in our designs and moving the industry forward, finding a way that we can make this a reality. And as you mentioned, the industry is not just an industry, it actually is a community. Whether it's PSAP to vendor relationship, vendor to vendor relationship, we all have a stake in this, and we want to see it done right because we all live in the communities that it serves. So thank you for having us, and that's all I have.
Great. And unfortunately, that is all the time that we have today. Thank you all for your questions. An amazing, amazing amount of questions came in, so that was wonderful. Thank you, Doug and Jim, for the discussion today. I know this, you know, being in public safety and serving the public safety agencies means a lot to you. It means a lot to all of us here at CenturyLink. A few quick reminders before we sign off. Please be sure to answer our survey questions to the right of the video module. We will email you a link to the on-demand version of this Coffee Talk, so check your inboxes tomorrow. And please don't forget to download our additional resources. I want to thank everyone, all of our agencies and customers for joining us today. I know that you're very busy and you have very important work that you do, so we appreciate you taking the time to join us for this, and we hope that you found it valuable. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Jim Carlson or myself or Doug. We're easy to find. It's just our first name dot last name at CenturyLink.com. And on behalf of the whole CenturyLink public sector team, once again, thank you. And please join us for future Coffee Talks. Our next one is in August on Unified Communications and Collaboration Solutions. And then we will be starting in September a security series, which I know is so important to everybody, and there's such a focus on it. And we want to sincerely wish you have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.